Welcome everyone to our wonderful opening meeting. We're so thrilled that you were here, either welcoming you on our Zoom page or on our YouTube page. My name is Robert Haas, and I have the pleasure of moderating tonight's Interfaith Recovery event. We're so thrilled to have a wonderful group of people here. Now, if you want to watch this show later on, obviously you can also see it as it's going to be continue to be on YouTube page. It's on the Mikveh Israel YouTube page right now. It'll be moved over to the Interfaith Recovery and Addiction page later. But before we begin our wonderful presentation, I introduce our presenter. It's a pleasure to invite one of the co-founders, Carol Pine, to speak a little bit about the organization.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our first virtual educational program here in Savannah. I am the co-founder of a young organization in Savannah that only got started a little over 2 years ago called the Interfaith Addiction and Recovery Coalition. We are nonprofit, we are totally volunteer run, and we have a singular mission, and that is to educate and support faith leaders of all faiths on the subject of addiction and recovery. Nationally, faith leaders have told us that a small percentage of them have any training in their religious training having to do with addiction and recovery, even though in this country, as we all know, virtually everyone knows someone who is struggling with addiction, and often they know someone who they love who is struggling. So this knowledge of addiction and recovery, especially for faith leaders, is crucial, we think, and particularly crucial now during this COVID era as substance abuse is increasing. We started out doing in-person educational forums, and we hope we will, in fact, after the COVID scare is over, return to our educational forums. But for now, we are doing virtual educational forums, and we're very glad you're here with us. And we are very blessed to have Jerry Moe join us as our first presenter. And Robert will introduce him. Thanks.
Thank you, Carol. It is an esteemed pleasure to have such an incredible person as our first virtual speaker. Jerry Moe is the National Director of Children's Programs at the Betty Ford Center, a part of the Hazelton Betty Ford Foundation. I know we've all heard of that. He's an advisory board member of the National Association for Children of Addiction. He is an author, lecturer, and trainer in issues for families and children hurt by addiction. Let me let this person in and I'll continue. His latest book is Through a Child's Eyes, Understanding Addiction and Recovery. He was featured in the Emmy Award-winning Nick News special, Under the Influence of Children's Addiction. Jerry recently appeared, and I'm going to make sure to mute everybody. We're going to pause for 1 second. We've got a couple people coming in now, so I want to make sure they get here at the beginning. Perfect. His latest book is Through a Child's Eyes, Understanding Addiction and Recovery. He was a feature person in the Emmy Award-winning Nick News special, Under the Influence, Children of Addiction. He also recently appeared on NBC Nightly News to discuss the opioid heroin epidemic and its impact on children. And as a specific introduction, because of my 1-year-old and 3-year-old, he served as a key advisor and consultant to Sesame Street on his parental addiction initiative. He is the 2020 recipient of the Leonard K. Firestone Award. And more importantly, he has promised to give me 2 autographs from Elmo to give my 3-year-old daughter and my 1-year-old son. So everyone, without further ado, Jerry Moe. Before he comes on, I am going to tell you that we're going to keep everybody mute throughout his presentation. He's going to do questions at the end, and we'll leave plenty of time for questions. If there's a question you believe you immediately need answered, just write it in the chat room. Thank you, Jerry. Welcome.
Rabbi Robert, thank you so much for that great introduction. And as soon as we're finished today, I'll call Elmo. It's kind of hard to score those autographs. I don't know what I'm going to have to do, but for your 1- and 3-year-old, man, we need to make sure that happens. So good morning to all of you. Welcome. Boy, do I wish I could be with you in person in Savannah right now. I was there. I actually did a training in Savannah in 1996 for the school district. That was a little while ago. So I've been to your beautiful community before. I want to thank you for your time. I know how busy you are. I want to thank you for your caring. And I want to thank you for all that you do. Real quickly, because I want to get into where we're going today, let me just say a couple sentences. So I'm a children and family therapist, and I've worked in the treatment field my entire career. And I work primarily with 7 to 12-year-olds. And you might ask me why, and I'll explain that later. But primarily 7 to 12-year-olds who come from families hurt by addiction, and the rest of the family as well. And I have to start with a story, and then we'll get right where we're going. So it was 2 years ago, it was April, way before the pandemic. And we were doing a children's program, right here on the campus of the Betty Ford Center. And there was a little boy, he was 8 years old, and he's participating. And the first morning, all that he'll tell us is his first name. I mean, but listen, he's paying attention. He's listening, he's laughing, he's playing. When a little girl talked about her mom relapsing, he's wiping tears from his eyes. He was right there. He just needed more time. So we just loved him. So fast forward 5 hours, we're getting out of the pool, going back to the children's program, and he came up from behind me and put his hand in my hand. He wanted to hold my hand, which is like the best compliment you could ever give me as a children's counselor. So we're walking back, and all of a sudden he stops, so I hit the brakes. And he looks at me and says, "Jerry Mo, can I ask you something?" And I said, "You can ask me whatever you want." Now inside I'm thinking, oh, he's going to start telling me about his family and what he's learned. And he looks right at me, big brown eyes, and earnestly says, "Jerry Mo, how long have you been at the Betty Ford Center?" And I didn't think about it. And I looked at him and said, "Well, I have been here over 20 years. You should have seen his response. His eyes got real big, and his jaw dropped, and his mouth is wide open. And he shakes his head and looks at me and says, 'Gosh, Jerry, you must have lots of problems. My mom only needs to be there for a few weeks.'" So welcome to my world. And as Carol and Robert said at the beginning, please don't get fooled by the name Betty Ford Center or Hazelden Betty Ford. We operate a children's program that's open to all boys and girls who come from a family history of addiction. You don't need to have somebody in treatment. You don't need to have somebody in recovery. Maybe boys and girls are brought by other members of the family. And no child is ever turned away due to an inability to pay. And I was thinking this morning on my way here, getting ready, we do everything virtually now. So if you want to, you can start sending families and children to us virtually. And the nice thing is there's no charge for those services right now. We'd love to work with you in that regard. I want to bring a message of hope. The children's program is always trying to get referrals. We work so close to faith leaders in our larger community. They send us boys and girls. They send us families, and we work together. So when Carol came to me with, the Interfaith Coalition and all the work that you've done, such a small amount of time, is like, I need to do this. This is really important. And we have just a huge audience for all the faith leaders here. Keep in mind that when a lot of people recover from a substance use disorder, there's a return to faith or initiation of faith and religious practices that have never taken place before. For those of you here this morning that are in recovery, I want to tell you how huge that is, not just for you, but for all the people that love you. There is a little girl that will call me this afternoon because it's Tuesday. And she calls me every Tuesday and just wonders, when is my mom going to get better from drinking? Do you think it's going to happen anytime soon? So there's so many boys and girls that give virtually anything to see their loved ones be okay. And I know we also have family members who are in recovery, and what a difference you can make in children's lives. So I salute you. This morning, I want you to think about is just being part one in a series. And at the end, Carol will tell you more about your next speaker and more about this topic. And what I want to do this morning, in the time that I have to share with you, is really talk about what is the experience of these boys and girls. What have I learned about them? And what are some ways that we can help them? And then during Q&A that Rabbi Robert will so kindly lead through the chat, we'll answer some real specific questions you might have. I think always, no matter if you're a teacher, a play therapist, a faith leader, a person in recovery, you always want to have some resources you can turn to. Some books, some pamphlets, some videos to show. And I'll share some of those with you, especially the work that we did with Sesame Street. You can never have enough tools and never have enough resources. So let's begin through a child's eyes. And Rabbi Robert, if you want to put up that PowerPoint, we'll just start rocking. And I put that particular slide right in the middle is Betty Ford, who just an incredible woman. And I had the opportunity to work with her for years here at the center. And she was really the guiding light behind the children's program. And so for her, one really important, yeah, you can leave it right there. That's good. One really important therapeutic tool to use with children is artwork. Because kids can often draw what they initially can't say. And then as you see that, if they're willing to share their artwork with other boys and girls can look at it, have comments, have reactions, ask questions. They can identify, they can relate, they can have feelings about it. But the key, one of the really important keys of working with these boys and girls is to help them separate the person they love, whether it's mom, dad, brother, sister, grandma, grandpa, how to separate the person from the disease that envelops them. Because boys and girls see this, how to separate those two. I learned very quickly in my clinical work that if I sit with a child and say, tell me about your mom's drinking, tell me about your dad's use of pain medication, tell me about your sister smoking marijuana, I'm putting that child in a dilemma. Because basically I'm asking him or her to betray and be disloyal to their loved one and the entire family. And that creates shame and guilt and anger and upset and confusion. But when we reframe it and ask them to tell about the disease, would you please tell me about addiction? Addiction that consumes the very people you love. Addiction that wreaks havoc on the entire family system. Addiction that takes everybody hostage. And we were doing a children's program pre-pandemic, and there was a 12-year-old girl. And much like the story I told you to start, she didn't have much to say, but boy, did she participate all day. And she actually drew this picture. And what she said at the end of the day, I learned something today. Addiction can turn the people we love into strangers. And so we asked boys and girls, how has addiction hurt your family? And so look at this first picture. I'll show you a number of slides and we'll move on. Look, and when I saw this piece of artwork, I did cartwheels because that young lady was able to separate addiction from the people she loves. And look at how big addiction is. Look at how fierce it is. Look at its claws. And as she described, that's a steel band around addiction's wrist. And as she shared the next day, Jerry, addiction has my mom, addiction has my sister, and addiction has my dad. And I thought she was done, and she took a breath and she started to cry. I mean, the tears started going down her cheeks. You know what she said? Am I next? Am I next? It seems like everybody in my family gets trapped by this. Do I have to be next? And how nice to be able to say, no, not necessarily. Not necessarily at all. Next picture, Rabbi Robert. How has addiction hurt your family? Look what this little boy has drawn. Here is a family, relatively happy family, and you add addiction. And look at how this family has torn apart. It's an interesting story. Dad got in a car accident. Dad started taking opiates. Dad gets addiction to these pain meds. When he can't get the opiates anymore, he turns to heroin. Pretty soon, mom gets addicted to. This was a family. We work with such diverse populations here because, again, our program's open to everybody with addiction in their family. This particular family had a lot of money. But I'm here to tell you that sometimes those families that have a lot of money allow people to stay sick in their disease a lot longer because they have the money to pay for the consequences. And even with their money and even with their lawyers, CPS showed up to their house one day and they took those kids because of the incredible neglect that was taking place. Nobody was taking care of these kids anymore. And look, they're all crying. Addiction can tear families apart. Next slide. And when the little boy who drew this picture shared it the next day, just about every kid in our circle cried, just started crying. So the boy had to take a really deep breath and say, that's the part of my heart that belongs to my mom. That's the part of my heart that belongs to my dad. Why do they fight? Why do they hurt each other? And they're both drinking. I'll never forget, he put his paper down on the floor. The group got really quiet. And he just looked at Carol, my co-facilitator, and said, Carol, my heart hurts. My heart hurts. You know, the power of these pictures. Next slide. Two little girls sitting outside their mom's bedroom. Mom is inside there injecting methamphetamine. The door's locked. The older sister who drew this picture, just a beautiful, gifted little girl, well, young lady, 12 years old, said that, you know, they would knock on the door and mom wouldn't answer. Is my mom alive? What's going on? What happens if somebody knocks on the door? What do I do? And it's interesting. I asked her, well, why don't you call your dad when this happens? And she says, I can't call my dad. He's at work and he's going to get mad at mom and they're going to fight. So imagine the terror of wondering, is my mom okay? Is she going to be all right? And taking care of a little sister. And all the children carry around inside unless they're given opportunities to be with other boys and girls and to begin to share this experience. Next slide. You see on the right-hand side of the picture, there's mom and dad, and they're fighting and they're yelling, and look at the thunder and the lightning. Look at the clouds. On the left side of the picture is a little girl who drew this picture in bed, and she's crying. I'll tell you, since the 1960s, since 1969, there have only been 3 research studies done in North America. And I say North America because the first study was actually done in Toronto, Canada. So from 1969 to today, 3 research studies done where they actually asked the children, they actually asked the teenagers, what hurts the most growing up in a family where there's addiction? Interesting. 3 studies done by different researchers in different decades in different locations, all came to the same conclusion. And that what children and teenagers say hurts the most isn't the drinking or the drugging per se. Of course that hurts. It's the family conflict. It's watching the people you love hurt each other with actions, with words, by throwing things. Just the conflict that kids feel when that goes on. It's huge. Next slide. Here is a great picture that again speaks to the opioid, heroin, fentanyl epidemic now. And let's realize COVID-19, that pandemic is just, it's been huge. And here in Southern California, we don't have spaces for people in hospitals anymore. So many people are dying. What a tragedy that's hit our country. But Carol made a comment that's so important, and that what we know is that overdoses for opiates, heroin, fentanyl have continuously been on the rise since the epidemic took place, the pandemic took place. We've seen so many people relapse during the pandemic.
just feeling cut off and feeling hopeless. And how has addiction hurt your family? Here's a little boy that comes home from school and finds his dad on the floor, passed out, and calls 911. And 911 arrives, and actually the paramedics give his dad Narcan. And if you've ever given Narcan to someone who's overdosed, sometimes there's that violent reaction, and that's what the kid is sharing right there. And just the trauma involved in seeing that and doing that. Next slide, just a couple left. We'll move on. Lies. Dad, have you been drinking? No, son, of course not. I'm going to bed now. Look at Dad's eyes. Sometimes we don't give boys and girls enough credit for knowing exactly what's going on. And sometimes people in their disease and even in early recovery just, hold on to the fact, no, my children haven't been affected by this. They haven't seen me. They haven't seen me drinking. They haven't seen me using. There's no way that they've been impacted. And someone years ago taught me a line that I'll use. Yeah, maybe the kids haven't seen the alcohol, but they're certainly experiencing the ism, the consequences of the drinking or the drug use. Kids know what's going on, and sometimes nobody validates them. And sometimes boys and girls feel like they're going crazy. Next slide. I miss you, Dad. And that's actually a picture of a little boy, and he drew it as if he could see his dad in prison being right there and just crying. I'm a law-abiding citizen. I think people need to have consequences when their behavior is irresponsible. It doesn't follow the letter of the law. But my goodness, we certainly need to have more treatment opportunities for people in jail and for people in prison, and more opportunities on the outside to be working with their families. And last artwork slide. How has addiction hurt your family? And I'll never forget the little girl who shared this. I will never do a presentation anywhere and not show this particular slide, because to me it says so much. So there's a little girl and she's crying, and what she describes, it's a Friday night. And look at mom. Mom's got an anger to her. Look at the way that little girl is. Look at the eyebrows. Look at the mouth. And the mom says, "You are too much. I am leaving." The physical, the emotional abandonment. And someone, a faith leader, a play therapist, a mental health professional, a teacher, someone needs to explain to this precious child that her mom has an addiction and she's in an incredible amount of pain right now. And in order to make the pain go away, she needs to go out on a Friday night. She needs to drink. She needs to use. And she needs to come up with an excuse to get out. And that precious little girl, it's not her fault, and there's nothing wrong with her. There's absolutely nothing wrong with her. And that picture is a call to action. What can we do? What can we do to help that child? And so next slide. What you just saw through a child's eyes was a great description about how this is a family disease. And unfortunately in America, children are the first that get hurt and the last to get help. Please hear me. First to get hurt, last to get help. And that needs to change. And all too often, this is what we see, it's a multi-generational cycle. And various aspects of this disease get passed from generation to generation to generation. I have actually spoken at treatment centers on 6 continents. I've spoken at treatment centers where someone needs to interpret for me. And no matter where I've been in the world, no matter where I've been, when I get in front of a group of people who are in treatment and we develop a relationship, we get a connection together, They see that I'm on their side, that I'm advocating for them and their family. And I ask that question, how many of them grew up with this disease? I've never seen anywhere that's under 75%. All too often, this disease gets passed along. And where does it stop? You know, where does it stop? Next slide. So if you look at the literature, if you look at the science, the research that's been done, boys and girls growing up in families hurt by addiction are often referred to as children at risk. And as you'll see in a few minutes, I have a real problem with this slide. I have a real problem with just looking at these kids as being at risk. That's not the whole story, but stick with me for just a moment. I've listed 4 things these kids are at risk for. Number 1, they're the number 1 at-risk group of boys and girls to grow up and get this disease themselves. We could never put together another population of kids who are more at risk. Does genetics play a part? Absolutely. There's a biological predisposition. We know that addiction tends to run in families. You know, it's in the genes, the skirt, the slacks, the shorts, whatever you're wearing, it's in there. It's there. But let's be clear. What boys and girls inherit is not addiction. What they inherit is the biological vulnerability to it. But environment plays an incredible part in this process. Let me tell you a story of a family of 3 kids to bring this point home. We'll move on. So pre-pandemic, before we were doing everything virtually, everything is done virtually. We can serve, we'd love to serve all of you in Savannah in our family and children's programs. We can do that. We can have a great partnership. I love it. Why didn't I think of that before? My goodness. My goodness. Children come in on the first morning and we spend an hour with them just playing, just getting to know them, just having a good time. You know, the programs that we do are all-day programs. Why is it important if you have an opportunity to do all-day programs? Because you need to build trust. You need to build relationships. And for all the faith leaders here, oh my goodness, you were safe people to your congregations. And that place of worship is a safe place. What a difference it can be made. Schools are such a safe place for kids. I had an 11-year-old girl tell me one time, you know why school's a safe place? And she said to me, it's the one place in my life I can do this, Jerry. And I know I'm going to be cared for all day long. And spelling off always comes after reading. And I know the rules and I know the consequences. Oh my goodness. So about an hour into our program, kids in a circle, we do introductions. And there was a family that came in 12, 9, and 7. And the mom had brought them, their dad was still addicted to drugs, had no intention at that point of wanting any kind of help. When it was a 12-year-old's turn to introduce himself, he said his name, he says, I'm 12. And he said, the only reason I'm here is because my mom says if I come to this place 4 days in a row, I get a new video game. Okay, we can roll with that. Tell me what you like to play. It's okay. We go around the circle, get to the 9-year-old. The 9-year-old talked even softer than I'm talking right now. You could barely hear her. I had to sit on the edge of my chair. You know what she said? Here's my name. I'm 9 years old. And all I know is my mom and dad fight a lot. And I get scared. And she's sitting next to Carol and just wraps her arms around Carol's ribs and sticks her little head in Carol's other ribs. And here's a little girl, 9, who an hour and 5 minutes ago didn't even know Carol and seeking comfort and solace. So we get around and then we get to the 7-year-old. You should have seen him. He's sitting, his name was Jeffrey. I called him Jeffy. He loved that. And he's sitting on the edge of his chair. He's just waiting for me to give him the nod. And I've always believed, you want to know what's really going on in a family? Take the youngest member of the family. It's got to be verbal, of course. Make it safe. Because I believe the younger we are, the closer we are to the truth. You know what he says? Let me tell you what happens in our family. And then I took a quick glance at the 12-year-old brother who's like this. And he says, my dad, he goes in the bathroom. He's in there for like an hour. He never even flushes. And all of a sudden there's smoke in the bathroom. I smell smoke. There's smoke in the bathroom. And I'm thinking to myself, Dad's smoking crack in the bathroom. And then I don't know who taught this little guy this or how he came up with it, but he said, and then the door opens and an alien comes out of my dad's body and he hurts my mom. Now I look at 12-year-old brother who's there for a video game. He's got his hands in his face. And he hurts my mom. And my brother sometimes runs for help, but my dad grabs him. And my sister goes under her bed, and I go in my closet, and I won't come out until the alien's gone. And then he looks at me and says, you think you can help us? You think you can help our family? Psychological hurt and pain, otherwise known as trauma. You take a biological predisposition and psychological hurt and pain, what a risk that creates for addiction later in life. Many of these boys and girls, there's child maltreatment. Now, there was a study done, I can't believe it was 20 years ago. There was a study done in late 2000 by the Center on Addiction and Substance Abuse. And what they found was this. Children who are growing up in families where there's addiction are almost 3 times more likely to be physically and or sexually abused, and over 4 times more likely to be neglected. We never talk enough about the neglect, the insidiousness of not being nurtured and loved and cared for in a consistent way. The state of South Carolina in 1997 did a 1-year public service campaign of which I was a part that went like this: alcohol abuse, drug abuse, child abuse. One thing often leads to another. Many of these children can have mental health issues, depression, anxiety, trauma, post-traumatic stress disorder. They're often put in dangerous situations, driving in cars with intoxicated loved ones, going with loved ones to get drugs, being put in real dangerous places with real dangerous people. Next slide, Robert. Here's the study called No Safe Haven. And the study concluded, this was 20 years ago, the study concluded with this: the children, are the most vulnerable and endangered individuals in America. No safe haven. So how do we make our places of worship safe? How do we become safe people in children's lives? We'll get into that in just a moment. Next slide. Yes, these are children at risk, but these are children of promise, and that's how I want to view them. These are boys and girls of beauty and grace that have inner skills and strength and gifts that just need to come out somehow. I'm here to tell you without a doubt, prevention works, early intervention works, and when the community comes together and all works together, law enforcement, mental health, schools, treatment, homeless shelters, the faith community. That's when we really can make the biggest difference of all. Next slide. What I'm really talking about is resilience. How is it that some people can grow up with such adversity? How is it that kids can grow up with such hardship and challenges and so many difficulties? And I got to tell you, for some of the boys and girls I work with, just to get to school on a daily basis is huge. And I hope I never forget that. Oh, I hope I never forget that. Successful adaptation, despite all the risk we talked about. And all the counselors that work at the Hazelden Betty Ford Children's Program, this next sentence is really incredibly important. That resilient folks draw upon inner strengths and skills and supports to prevent that adversity from derailing one's life. And so, how do we help kids build their strengths? In the children's program, we hold up this huge mirror to help people see their beauty and goodness. We catch kids doing good stuff. We help them to grow and to nurture those strengths, given by God, given by a higher power, putting to use. We help with skills, problem-solving skills, communication skills, how to make friends, self-care, boundaries, refusal skills, how to deal with stress, and supports. You know, I'm a firm believer that children don't care about how much we know until they know about how much we care. That's the most important part. Bringing our heart and our spirit to this work and helping kids build those. And so how do we do that? Let me spend the last part of my talk and I'll wrap this up. How do we do that? Next slide. Healing stages. Here we go. One more. Yeah, next slide. Yeah. So teaching kids about addiction, helping them to understand. Now, all of my years as a children's therapist, and it has to deal with abuse and all different kind of traumatic situations, you know, being food insecure these days, families where there's just not enough food in all of this. If nobody explains what's going on in an age-appropriate way, kids make up a story for it all to make sense. Kids will make up a story. And what I found about that story to have three features. Number one, that story tends to be egocentric. You know, because developmentally, kids see themselves as being the hub of the universe. So usually that story is about me. You know, what did I do in all of this? Secondly, the story is erroneous. You know, the story is erroneous because often what kids are doing is saying somehow it's their fault. Somehow they've done something wrong. Somehow they're worthless. They're not worthy. And what I see in the 3 treatment centers that I've worked at over the last 40 years is that some people, that becomes a life script, in that I always mess up. I'm no good. I'm not worthy of recovery. Anything I touches, you know, I'm gonna hurt. I don't deserve any of these things. So what we want to do is we want to change that narrative. We want to give kids a different way of looking at this perspective. And again, separating the person from the disease, really important of doing that. And boy, I need to go do a spell check on separate there. My goodness, unbelievable. Let's go to the next slide. And so I want to teach boys and girls that it's not their fault and they're not to blame, and that children don't make their loved ones drink or use drugs. And unfortunately, they can't make them stop, because so many ways boys and girls try desperately somehow to make them stop, and they can't do that. We had a dad at one, and it was his minister who referred him to the children's program. And he brought his 2 daughters. His wife had addiction. She was in and out of their lives. Dad was the constant parent. Minister said, need to go to this program. So they came and they participated, and they stayed involved with us over a number of years. And then just a couple of years back, I got a call from the dad on Christmas Eve morning that the girl's mom had died of a heroin overdose the night before. And the girls needed to come in and see me. And we talked, and the little one said, hey, you know, we're going to say goodbye to my mom in a couple of days. I want you and I want Megan, another one of our counselors, I want you to come and sit with me and be with me, because I know this is really going to be hard. So there we were in the church, 200 people. And what was fascinating is no one was talking about the elephant in the living room. No one was talking about mom's addiction. And the 12-year-old, we thought we concluded, was being given back to the minister to say a prayer to end the memorial service. And the 12-year-old daughter gets up and goes to the front, gets out of the front pew and says, hey, everybody, thank you for being here. There's something you need to know about my mom. She got trapped by addiction. My mom was using drugs. Now, she's not a bad mom. She just got sick. And I hope you can remember the good stuff about my mom, because that's what I'm doing right now. And besides the words, you know, the real meaning of that, and she told that without guilt, without shame, without embarrassment. It's kind of like, this is what happened to my mom, and we're going to go on in our lives. Next slide. You know, I also want to show you artwork of people getting better, of children healing, of families recovering. And so here in our continuing care program that we're doing virtually these days, how do we know we're getting better? And a 14-year-old who came through the children's program when she was 11 drew this: recovery, you have to earn it. And she had a key there and said, that's my dad's key. And we're on the other side of the door. And I hope someday he can take that key and put it through the door and come and join us. But we got to get on with our lives. Next slide. Now, Dr. Claudia Black taught us many years ago, about the 3 family laws of addiction. And that often in a family where addiction is present, family members learn don't talk. So addiction becomes the secret everyone knows. We learn don't trust. You can't trust adults. You can't trust people in your family. They'll let you down. They'll hurt you. They'll disappoint you. And don't feel. And don't feel your feelings. Deny them, repress them, suppress them, medicate them, anesthetize them. Don't talk, don't trust, don't feel. And if you think about what we're trying to do is ask kids to do the exact opposite. Trust us, talk to us, tell us how you feel. And the miracle is they do it. Oh, do they want to do it? Oh, do they want to be a part of that? So next slide. So we talk about opening doors. Please keep in mind, and for those of you in recovery that are on our Zoom today, you know this to be true, and that this is a disease of isolation, silence, secrecy, shame, and stigma. And it's true not just for the person with a substance use disorder. Oh, it's true for that person, but it's also true for the rest of the family. And it's also true for the kids. It's a disease of isolation and silence and shame and secrecy. And so we want to break those laws of don't talk, don't trust, don't feel. We want to help boys and girls get out whatever is inside and get some validation. My favorite part of children's programs, usually the second day, kids feel safe. They're talking to each other. And they go, so you thought it was your fault too? Or you get scared when the weekends come and you don't want to invite kids to your house because you might get embarrassed? For them to see that they're not alone. In the children's program, one of the activities that we do, let me show you. Let me just show you real briefly. One of the activities, everybody carries this backpack that weighs 41 pounds. And we tell boys and girls that mom and dad have been carrying around one of these long before the children were even born. How could it ever be their fault? And we take the bag and boys and girls start to take out the rocks. So look at what's inside. So the hurt that people carry. We can talk about the fighting that takes place in a family and not have to keep it inside. And the secrets that boys and girls share. Next slide. And so we put feeling faces on the wall so boys and girls have a frame of reference. We create safety. That's the key. And we listen with purpose. And I'm amazed. You know what? Some kids, they talk about what's going on. Other kids, you saw artwork. We write stories through role plays, but boys and girls begin to process what's been going on in their lives. Rabbi Robert, I think of you. There is a rabbi who's since retired locally, and he sent a foster mom who was taking care of a little boy, and she was having some difficulties. Foster kid was 8 years old. We'll call him Oski. That was his nickname in the children's program. And on the third day of the program, he got to sit across from his foster mom and talk to her and tell her a few things. And her job was just to listen. And, I was blown away. You know what he said to her? He said three things. He said, "Thank you for taking such good care of me. Thank you for buying me a jacket. And thank you for the delicious food that you make for me every day." I mean, she was deeply touched. And I asked him, "Is there anything else?" And he looked at her and he said, "Do you think I could have a nightlight?" And other people in the group started, they were giggling about why he would want a nightlight. And I knew where he was going, and foster mom didn't know. And I said, "Well, please explain about the nightlight." And he looked at her and said, "Right before I go to sleep at night, I think about my mom. Where is she? Is she okay? Is she in jail? Is she using drugs? Will I ever get to see her again?" And this little guy looks right at this just adoring foster mom and says, "I get sad and scared, and I think the nightlight would help me." And they hugged. And so kids being able to deal with so much of the emotional baggage that they carry around, and for them to figure out who are safe people to talk to about this stuff. Next slide. So you can see the date of this, 2806. That was a while ago. But again, in continuing care, how do we get better? And here is a young girl who's showing, her emotion bag and how to deal with what's going on inside, and to talk about it and to feel it, and then to be able to let it go. Next slide. One of my favorite slides of all. So this drawing was done by a little girl named Rosa. And Rosa is in the black dress. And there's Lupita, her older sister. There's mom and grandma. How do we know we're getting better? Look what mom and grandma are doing. Nice words. Nice words. That mom was celebrating 2 years of sobriety. And look what was changing in her family in doing that. Next slide. We teach kids about self-care. We begin to help them think about who are the safe people in their lives. Is there somebody at home that's safe? Sometimes there isn't. Is there somebody at school that's safe? Is it a teacher? Is it a counselor? Is it the principal? Is it the school nurse? Is there somebody in their neighborhood that's safe? Could it be a next door neighbor? But is there somebody else safe in their life? Could it be a soccer coach? Could it be a minister? Could it be a faith leader? And could it be a band director? Helping kids figure out who to turn to when they can't turn to people in their own families. We teach boys and girls the importance of taking care of their body, taking care of their mind, having positive thoughts and affirmations. We've talked about feelings, how to take care of their spirit, and how to connect to other people, how to build relationships, how to pray, how to be grateful, how to partake in religious practices, and teach them how to take care of that little kid inside of them, working on that on a daily basis, doing all of those things, and getting validation when they do those things. Next slide. How do we know we're getting better? So look, here's a little girl, and she can't wake her mom up. And instead of not knowing what to do, grandpa's one of the people on her safe person list, and she calls him immediately for help. And just not dealing with that by themselves. We do a holiday hotline for kids from our program during the time between Christmas and Hanukkah and the beginning of the year. And I got a call on Christmas night at 11:34. That was one of my nights to be on call. 11:34 at night, I get a call from a 9-year-old who woke up, spending the night with mom. Doesn't happen very often. And he wakes up and she's gone. There's no one there. What did he do? He knew to call. And we stayed on the line until mom got back and then got grandma involved. So giving kids a plan. And even if they never have to engage the plan, kids feel safer knowing that there is a plan and not feeling just out of control, not knowing what else to do. Next slide. I got to wrap up pretty quick here. So celebration, finding the buried treasure, all the beauty and worth and goodness that kids have inside. I believe that everyone who is born is blessed by God, a higher power, whatever people believe, whatever faith they have. I believe everybody's blessed. And that my job is to help them, is to help children begin to see what those gifts are and to use them, to develop them, to deepen them, and to see, and to have a bit of hope. Because where are we without hope? Next slide. So my dad is in recovery. Me too. There was a march on Washington in 2016. It was a recovery march at the national Capitol. And this drawing done by a little girl in our children's program was the drawing that was featured there that day. So kids with their parents, kids in recovery, families in recovery, beginning to have some help and some hope and some healing. Next slide. I promised you, I've worked with Sesame Street for the last couple of years. Are you kidding me? That's like bucket list stuff for me. Being on the set at Sesame Street, hanging out with Elmo, unbelievable. And so there is a character. If you go to this page, there's a character. Her name is Carly. And we'll make sure that everybody who's on here, we'll figure out a way to get you this PowerPoint because I see people furiously writing. We'll get you this. So there is a brand new Muppet. Her name is Carly. She's 6.5 years old. And Carly's mom is coming home from treatment soon. And Carly is excited and scared and nervous all in the same breath. So if you go to this website, this has been a game changer for 5, 6, 7, 8, 9-year-olds. You'll see videos. You'll see a storybook that we worked on. You'll see coloring activities. You'll see an article that I wrote on rebuilding trust with our kids in recovery. But there's just some wonderful, wonderful resources here. And also, and you'll hear more from this from Carol, the National Association for Children of Addiction, NACOA, another website with wonderful resources that are free, that are downloadable. What I'd hope all of you had to help you when you're working with children and families is a storybook or two, a referral source or two, that you can be that safe person that can initiate discussions. Not even essential that you have to bring up the dreaded A word, addiction. Just that kindness and that nurturing and the caring, and all of us working together. So let me conclude this way. And again, I wish we were together. I wish I was in Savannah today and we could do this live. You know, in those few moments of wisdom that I have, fleeting, but what I realize is I'm not a children's therapist. I'm not a prevention specialist. I'm a farmer. I'm a farmer. And that every day I throw seeds. And we're going to get off this after we do some Q&A. It'll be time for me to get to work. I throw seeds all day long. Every once in a while, a seed hits a child, a family member's heart in that small little place that's still fertile. And a genesis begins. And you know, we're really itinerant farmers. We throw a lot of seeds all over the place. We rarely get to see the fruits of our labor. And boy, do I largely rely on my faith and have hope. Let me give you a harvest as a way to thank you and honor you. So I've worked in 3 treatment centers in my career. I was at the 2nd treatment center about 25 years ago, and someone is there to visit me. And it's like, who visits you at a treatment center? And I go, it's the end of the day, I go to the front desk, and there is this man-child who sees me and calls me Jelly Beans, is what they called me at the first treatment center. Kids call me Jelly Beans, is a nickname they gave me. And he came, he was a man-child, he was about 25 years old, came and gave me this big hug and said, Jerry, my name is Curtis. Do you remember me? And I go, oh yeah. I didn't remember him. I couldn't tell him that. And he said, I was in one of your groups at Sequoia Hospital in Redwood City, California, 12 and a half years ago. And he said, tomorrow is going to be the most important day of my life. I found where you were. I had to see you. I hope you don't mind me coming. We sat. He said, you know, I've lived half my life since I last saw you. You know, what you need to know, when I turned 13, my dad died of a drug overdose, an 8-ball of heroin and cocaine. And I still miss my dad. And a year later, my mom married someone just like my dad, but he wasn't my dad, and he would hit me. He said, I graduated from high school a semester early, and I've spent 6.5 years working full time and going through college. And I looked at him and said, oh man, I am so proud of you. He says, tomorrow I start the University of Arizona School of Medicine. I got a scholarship. And again, I said, oh, I'm so proud of you. He took out his wallet. He took out his wallet, opened it up, took out a piece of paper that was 12 and a half years old. It was folded 8 times. It was the last activity we'd ever done together, where everybody in group wrote their name on the middle, first name on the middle of the page, and we passed it around the group. And everybody wrote what was special about them. I called it a living card. Those are the gifts that we have. And he took it out, and it was so faded, you could barely see some of it. He said, you know, Carlos wrote that, LaShonda wrote that, Malcolm wrote that. You said you didn't write that. I know how you write. You wrote that. He says, I just want to tell you how much that meant to me. I've never forgotten. And every time I was about to give up, I would look at that piece of paper, and it gave me hope, and it gave me purpose, and it gave my life meaning. And it's amazing. Today is Tuesday. So Curtis is a well-known and loved and respected doctor right outside of Tucson, Arizona. We talked before the holidays. We do every year. And today is Tuesday, and what a fitting day for us to be doing this together, because, gosh, in Tucson time, in just a little while, he'll spend all morning at a medical clinic giving medical services for free. And I say, why do you still do that? Because I need to pay it forward for all the wonderful things that were in my life. And I tell you that story to give you just a little bit of hope and to help you see, as a faith leader, as a teacher, as a play therapist, as a mental health practitioner, as a neighbor, as a concerned community member, someone is going to come looking for you sometime soon. You probably won't even remember them, but they're going to want to say thank you. Thank you for making such an incredible difference in my life. And that's the way we do it. So thank you for this opportunity. I'm going to wrap this up right now, and we'll shift, and we'll go right into some Q&A.
Thank you so much. That was an incredible presentation. I think everybody was moved, and really such great information and so helpful. So what we're going to do is I'm going to invite people to press the thing on the where it says reactions and raise your hand, and then we'll call on you to ask a question. The first question was already put to me, and it comes from Steve. What are some of the common enabling behaviors children do when mom and dad or both are addicted?
Well, it's tough. They're enabling behaviors. You know, I tend to want to call them survival behaviors. So what are some of the things boys and girls do? They deny that there's a problem sometimes. Often they don't feel safe enough to speak their truth, at least at home. Sometimes they take on adult roles and responsibilities around the house. You know, often they walk on eggshells and want to do the best they can to avoid conflict and difficulties, want to smooth things over and keep the peace. Taking care of younger siblings. And often we'll see that role reversal when people are active in their illness of a substance use disorder, where the kids sometimes become the parents and the parents become the kids. You know, we'll have kids putting parents to bed. We'll have, sometimes people in their disease taking money out of their kids' piggy banks instead of putting money in. And all of those things. And And the difficulty with all of that is boys and girls are just trying to survive. They don't know any better. And sometimes they think they're the only ones who are dealing with this. And the reality today, and I wanted to make sure today that what I really wanted to do was to try to put a face on this and not throw a bunch of statistics at you. But we're talking about somewhere between 1 out of every 3 and 1 out of every 4 kids across America. Used to be 1 out of 4, and then this opioid epidemic has just pushed those numbers up.
Thank you. All right, we got 2 more questions so far from Beth. Will you repeat what you said halfway through about kids are at risk to be abusers because they don't know how to deal with vulnerabilities? It was important, but I can't quite remember how you phrased it.
So say that one more time, Robert.
Will you
Can I add? Sorry, can I jump in? I shouldn't
Please.
have said abusers. I meant substance abusers. That they're at risk to be You said earlier on how people talk about there's a predisposition, or if
Right.
the parent's a substance abuser, they're going to be a substance abuser. And you said it's not that necessarily genetically they've inherited it, but that's something about that they respond to vulnerabilities the same way. How did you say that?
Let me make sure we get this right. And thank you so much for clarifying. The craziness of doing this through Zoom is, I can only see a few of you. I'm traveling blindly. So thank you for the bit of clarity. What I was saying is that besides that biological vulnerability, environment also plays a part. And, and then for a lot of kids, it's that psychological hurt and pain. It's that trauma that's involved. I mean, my goodness, you look at people in treatment today. What are a lot of them trying to, what are a lot of them trying to do is go back and deal with that trauma that happened to them when they were kids in all of this. But the point I want to make is sometimes, and I see this with a lot of folks in recovery. They're in recovery now and say, oh my goodness, I think my kid's going to get this disease. And it's like, slow down. We don't know if your child's going to get this disease or not. How about we empower them with some living skills? And one of the things we teach in the children's program is this, that if you don't pick up a drink or drug, addiction can't grab you. And part of what we're always trying to do is push back age of first use, push it back. And that, we see people come into treatment all the time, and they're starting drinking or using at younger and younger ages. So does that get at where you, is that getting it at part of what you wanted?
I think so. I wish I had an automatic memory that I could pull up the sentence that you said so perfectly. And because the essence I think I got from it was, it's not that biologically they're predetermined, but it's more that they may wind up handling things the same way because that's what they've learned, I think is what you were saying, like that's going to be their response to the stressors of life, which also leads me to think, what about all these kids that have been adopted or in foster care early on? I wonder, I'm sure there's statistics out there about how likely they are to become substance abusers.
It's the kind of thing that, so many people grow up with this disease and get it. But there's so many people who grew up with this disease and don't get it. Mm-hmm. And I think we need to focus on that as well. And, I'm after parents and grandparents, and you made a really important point, adopted parents and foster parents, and getting them to see, we don't know what's going to happen. Come on, don't create a self-fulfilling prophecy here. But how do we continue to give kids skills and tools to deal, with the complexities of living on a daily basis? And the more of those skills, and for all the recovering folks on the call this morning, think about what recovery is. We're learning those skills and tools. That's how we maintain our sobriety. We know we're learning what to do. Family members as well. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Our next question comes from Reverend Colbreth. Either you can ask it yourself or I'm happy to ask it if you want to. It says, what impact has virtual school had upon children in addicted families since these children look to school as a safe place?
It's really hard. I worry, and I understand, and I'm not an epidemiologist, but I'm worried for kids. Honestly, I'm worried for all kids that are doing virtual schooling these days, and the missed opportunities for social and emotional development. I mean, that's tough. I've got 3 grandkids that have been doing virtual school since last March, and I just worry about the long-term impact. I think that there's a couple of things to add to it, and for the Reverend who asked the question, it's a great question, and I would say this, that whenever we have a tragedy in America, and we could talk about when the federal Murrah building was blown up in Oklahoma City, when 9/11 took place, Hurricanes Rita and Katrina, a couple of things happen. One is that many people who are in recovery from a substance use disorder relapse. And there could be many different reasons why they relapse. Let's not get into that part of it. So the impact that I see on kids is that, and think about what happened at the Capitol less than a week ago. In Washington, D.C., when those kind of things happen, little kids need someone to explain it to them in an age-appropriate way, to reassure them, to help them see that they're safe, to talk about the dynamics. And if a person is, in their disease, they're not capable of doing that. And so then kids are missing out on that part too. In terms of the pandemic, think about all the kids that are home and that don't get the opportunity to go to school right now, that don't get the opportunity except virtually to practice their faith or to play soccer or to be in band. And so kids can get isolated, during this time. And I think about the other thing is that, gosh, virtual world is crazy. And I see with my own grandchildren how much extra help they need. And how much guidance they need in order to just be able to do school on Zoom. And fortunately, I have a grandmother, my wife, that's helping them, and their parents are helping them. But when a parent is preoccupied with their substance use disorder or with a loved one's substance use disorder, how much time do they have to help kids that are dealing with all just the difficulties with school itself? So a lot of difficulties go on in all of that, and we need to have people explain to children what's going on, or again they'll make up a story, or they'll feel that it's not safe.
We have a question from Anna Pierce. I'm going to invite her to ask about DFCS.
Hey, I'm one of the Savannah Chatham County Public School counselors, and I work in an elementary school setting, and I think DFACS is overworked. They don't have enough resources. I think anyone would admit to that. However, I guess one of my frustrations working with students who I can't say, I don't diagnose, so I don't know that the parent necessarily is an addict, but I know that there are definitely troubling behaviors related to either substance use, alcohol, drugs that the kids will tell me about. And oftentimes it will be information where I have to make a DFACS report, such as, them describing behaviors about driving in a car after mom had been drinking and obvious impairment, or the child taking care of mom at home and being the parent at home. However, in my experience, I feel that the feedback that I get back from the caseworkers is being an addict does not mean that they're neglecting their child. And I say, absolutely, you're correct. But when these behaviors occur, I do consider that neglect. That's what we're taught. And I guess I just, I don't know where to go when we don't have a whole lot of things that we can do here besides relate to the child, support the child in that way. But ultimately, if DFACS can't step in, where do we go from there? And why is that? If that's unsafe to me, those behaviors. So why is that being classified? And this is over a variety of times. It's being said that that's not, just because there's addiction there.
So let me answer that in a couple of ways. And thank you so much for asking the question. And thanks so much for what you do, because there's got to be boys and girls that you're their safe person. And they're coming to you because they don't have anyone else to go to. But your frustration, I see it, I feel it, is that you can only do so much. What else do we have for these boys and girls? What else can we be doing for them? So, I mentioned, I want you to write down this website. It's www.nacoa, NACOA.org. And I know that the Savannah Interfaith Coalition is starting to work with NACOA. And there it is. It's in the chat box. Thank you so much. Thank you, Rabbi Robert. You're always right there. What would I do without you? We're going to take this show on the road, but I got to have you with me. And then I'll certainly get you those Elmo autographs you've been looking for. There's some wonderful resources there that you can use with students when they're with you. And I got to tell you, we're making child abuse reports, suspected child abuse reports all the time. And that I think that a way to advocate for children is I need to make that report. Not only am I mandated, and I take that incredibly seriously, that to make those reports. And often, as you're saying, nothing becomes of those reports, but I still need to report it. And sometimes the squeaky wheel gets the grease. And if they hear that enough times, but there are some more resources that you can use. We just need more programs. I mean, that's really the bottom line. One of the things that we've been doing here, just in a sentence, because I know there's some other people that have questions, Mrs. Ford, Betty Ford, 21 years ago said, we need to go to the schools because that's where the kids are. And so we actually have a program that we bring into the local elementary schools. And so it's the counselor, it's a school counselor and the principal that pick the children. And then the principal sends home a letter that we help write. And the way the letter is written, it's very carefully written. We're not trying to fool anybody or trying to pull the wool over on anybody, but we say it's a prevention program for boys and girls that come from families that have been hurt by addiction. They've been hurt by alcohol and drug use, and leave it at that. And those programs, they work really well. Actually, we did our first 2 virtual programs in the schools. And we got to go to where the schools are. That's where the kids are. But we cannot expect the schools to do all of this work. It's got to be a school community partnership. And I think where you're really getting caught up right now is just that we need more resources. And I think that the Savannah, Interfaith Coalition are going to keep working on that. We just need to work more closely together and know. And again, for our regular programs, you ever want to refer a family, I'll make sure you get my contact information. And so if you ever run across a family where maybe mom has a problem, but dad wants the kids to get help, and we do a 2-day virtual for kids these days. We always do it on the weekend, 3 hours, 2 days in a row. It's a lot less than what we were doing before, but it's age appropriate in terms of, trying to do Zoom stuff with kids. But we can make that, because you can be anywhere now. That's the game changer about doing things virtually. It's not like you have to get to where we are. We can come to you.
Thank you so much.
And I really believe that what you'll see is that you will see the interfaith leaders in Savannah begin to look at what can we provide, to our parishioners, to our congregation, because so many people do go to their place of worship as a place to find healing and respite and hope and faith. So just bless you. Thank you for the work that you do. It's so important.
And if you haven't seen the chat, Donna just put in a beautiful email about what we're trying to do in the Savannah area, which you can see in the chat.
There you go.
We have some information from Lindsay Gravenstein, hopefully I pronounced your name correctly, about Beyond the Bell, a local nonprofit. So if anybody wants to check that out in the chat room, and saying that that's where they discuss communication skills. So I think we all know that because of COVID, everything has been enhanced. And sometimes people think our hands are tied behind our back, but you got to do what you get to do. And what you said is so obviously important that we can now go to experts around the world to help them work with our kids without having to get on a plane. And so there's a lot of resources, not just in our area, but around the world. I know even for finding speakers for our synagogue, whereas we used to, worry about getting people in our area, now I can call anybody or ask anybody. So does anybody else have any other questions? If you do, please just unmute yourself or put it in the chat. I don't see any others at this time, or give me a hand up or thumbs up. Okay. So really, this was an incredible, incredible presentation. Before I leave this over to Carol, I want to remind everyone that this whole program will be on the Mikveh Israel Savannah YouTube page. I know many people came in late for various reasons. So again, the Mikveh Israel, I'll type it in again. It's MICKVE Israel of Savannah YouTube page. And that's where it'll be on. If you want the PowerPoint, I will have Carol send that out, as we have a copy that, since if you don't mind, you mentioned that was okay. So thank you for graciously allowing us to do that. So again, to say official thank you to you, I'm going to invite Carol now to come on in as we'll conclude our program. Carol, you're on mute still. And I think Donna had one more thing she wanted to mention as well.
Donna, you go first.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to mention, I think, Jerry, you said you had some children's bibliotherapy you wanted to highlight. And I've also been on your webpage. You offer free virtual sessions to children. I just wanted you to highlight that, if you don't mind that.
Yeah, no, it's a 2-day virtual program, and I'm certainly not here to do an advertisement for it. But if we can ever be of service, because virtual, like I said, changes the world, give me a holler. We can work on that. In terms of the Biblio, and thank you for bringing that up again, look at, I think, to not overwhelm anybody too much with all of this, go to the Sesame Street and Communities. It's a great book there, but also go to NACOA. Yeah. And again, there's a couple of, we created a booklet, I guess it's called A Kit for Kids. And it's downloadable and it's free. And again, these are resources that I was involved in creating. So I'm not giving you something that I've never looked at before in any way. They also have a kit for parents that's free and downloadable. That's fascinating, Donna, that you would bring it up, because today there are more grandparents who are getting that kit for parents because of grandparents raising grandchildren. And note too, and Carol will tell you that the other thing that immediately made me think of NACOA when I think about the Savannah Interfaith Coalition is they also do trainings, especially for faith leaders. So there's a good synergy there as well.
Yes, and I'll chime in first to say how blessed we are to have you in our presence, Jerry. I didn't warn people to bring Kleenex, but I'm sure that everyone who listened to you today, myself included, had moments when I had tears in my eyes, and that's good. You speak from the heart, and you speak with so much amazing experience. You talked about sowing seeds. That's what you do day in and day out. And that's what we're doing in Savannah. We are, as a young organization, sowing seeds of knowledge and awareness, and encouraging, in particular, our faith leaders to break that code of silence, to talk about this disease and its impact on all ages, but especially on children. And I think what you've done is help us break that silence by sharing as you have. I have quite a few things on my to-do list for everyone. And in order to reach you who have participated, we need to know how to reach you. We need your name and email and telephone number if you're willing. We'd like to add you to our master communications list so we can tell you about what's coming up. And what's coming up, which is very exciting, and I hope you will put it on your calendars right now. Dr. Steve DeLisi of Hazelden Betty Ford will give a talk on Tuesday, March 9th from 11 to 12:30 time, Tuesday, March 9th, on adverse childhood experiences. And it's a natural progression from what Jerry has talked about today. The whole notion that growing up with trauma, being in an environment as children who live with trauma, it will affect our adult lives, our adult health, and are a predictor of possible addictive behavior. So to understand what ACE is, it's a relatively new term, I think, to a lot of people. And we want to make sure that we have Dr. DeLisi explain what it is, how it impacts children, and how it impacts adults. So that will be on March 9th. And I already have a plan to call the founder of NACOA, Jerry, and ask her if she could be a presenter, because we need to hear from her. Her name is Sis Wenger. She is as passionate as you are about this subject. And she has shared with us a curriculum for faith leaders for working with children who are affected by addiction. And we are hoping that we can offer that to our faith leader community here in Savannah. And that will be an important next step. The last thing I want to tell you is that there's a new effort called the Addiction Alliance of Georgia. And I'd like you to know about it, because we're here in Georgia, and it's an alliance between Hazelden Betty Ford and Emory University. And it has many aspects to it, but one of those important aspects is community education on the subject of addiction. So we will be collaborating with the Addiction Alliance of Georgia in any way we can to spread the word to people who need to know about this disease. So I've probably said enough. We have a lot to do. And I'm grateful for, as Rabbi Haas is, for this technology, because here you are with us. And we have Dr. DeLisi coming up in March, and then hopefully Sis, the founder of NACOA. So stay tuned, and please let us know how to reach you so we can let you know what's next. And thank you, Robert, for being such an amazing moderator.
Carol, if I can add real quick, I would love to encourage everybody here to also include CASA.
Yes.
CASA, please involve us. I'm a CASA volunteer. I'm also a mental health clinician, and also CHINS, Children in Need of Services. This is often a neglected area, and these are the moms and dads whose children need additional services. And these children are often ending up in foster care instead of, or the juvenile court system, because they need additional, mom and dad need additional hands and additional help. And they don't need to end up in a foster care home or the system because they need assistance. Okay.
Thank you so much. And please give us your contact info so we can make sure we stay in touch with you. Thank you for coming today.
Oh, you're welcome.
Carol, people can email me if you want us to have your email address. I'll send that out. But I just wanted to say that thank you to Carol Pine. Carol brought the Interfaith Coalition, I don't get the name right, Addiction Recovery Interfaith Coalition to Savannah. And she's amazing and is doing so much for us. Thank you, Carol.
Thank you.
And I want to echo Donna's response. I wanted to do that as well. Thank you, Carol, to organizing this. And if you have any other questions about any of these things, please, we've sent the contact materials out there. There's a Facebook page, there's a YouTube page that'll be set up a little bit more in the future. And again, thank you to Jerry one last time. That was an exceptional, truly exceptional presentation, and we really are so proud that we're able to get you here in Savannah, even though we weren't able to get you in person. But thanks again for all you do.
You're welcome. And I want to stay a part of the Savannah Interfaith Addiction and Recovery Coalition. I'm part of this family too. I'm just your long lost cousin living in the desert of Southern California, wandering around.
I tell you what, Jerry, we are not going to lose you.
Good.
You are in our family. Thank
Next
you.
time you're in town, I'm taking you out for some good Southern food. Fried
Woo!
chicken, Miss Wilkes. We'll go to Pink House. We'll go to some of the great haunts in Savannah, all on us.
I'm on my way.
So this,
Love
Jerry, you said you've been wandering around in the desert, and you mentioned you've been doing this for 40 years. Do you know Moses by any chance?
Yeah, I actually had him in one of my groups. So
I hope he was a guest speaker.
Yeah.
he
Hey,
was.
Get him. Maybe we can get him on the calendar.
Well,
Thank you.
Thanks again. And again, thank you everybody for joining us and everything you were doing. We'll see you at the next program, and good luck. And again, stay safe. Hopefully by the end of this year, we'll be able to have some of these programs in person.
Amen.
Stay
Thank
safe.